everybody. Guess what? I'm on the other side of the table today. I'm being interviewed by Mr. Mark Eckel. Let's see what he look like today.
Hey, y'all doing out there? Thanks for joining us. We can't wait to do this program with you. I'm going to adjust my chair so I actually get in the same shot as my friend Renita here.
I'm going to try and move this where we trying to get it cornered, right?
There we go.
We got this
We got
elbow
good?
here.
We
We're
got
good.
good?
We are good.
Okay.
We are good. I get to be interrogated, guys.
This is a co-host situation, just
This
so
is
y'all
like
know.
such a new experience.
Well, you know, considering that I was on your show twice, you know, it's
He
about
caught
time.
me. He caught me on spring break.
Yeah, it's about time I get you to come out over on our side.
Oh. But you know I'm always here for you.
Yeah, there you go.
Always.
Always grateful for that. So, everybody, we're talking about domestic violence today on this show from a Christian point of view. Talking about Voice of the Victim, of course, Renita Hill's great organization. And all of those good things are going to be coming here in just a couple of minutes. This is Warp and Woof Radio, where we actually focus on how to think about things from a Christian point of view. Everything we talk about, we have all kinds of different guests here. And one of the things that we want to do is unite community members around Indianapolis who are doing good, Titus 3, 1, 8, and 14. That's really important, powerful to us. So that's what we do each and every week. Our co-host today is gone. Dr. Clyde Posley, unfortunately, had to step out today. So it's Renita and I, and of course HB in the background over there, going to be spinning some tunes for us. So always dependent upon him. We've been doing this show for 2.5 years now. Grateful for the opportunity. Grateful for my good brother HB, who's done all kinds of good work promoting Radio Next. And there's some new stuff coming out. Don't miss what's coming here. We've got a mixer coming up. HB, what's the date on that? April 20th. A mixer, jazz mixer, a Collaborate 317. Come on out for that. Check out all of the social media posts on that. And of course, just thankful to be here again. Renita, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. You know, we do what we do. This is my brother too, guys. We he let me claim him.
Uh-huh. Yep. Sister and brother.
There it is.
There it is.
Hey, and you guys know the rules of the game. If Mark doesn't mind, they like to tap in sometime and ask questions as we go.
You feel free.
All right.
Yeah.
So you know the rules of the game.
We've got questions that we're going to be talking about, but we don't have to cover everything. And in fact, if we get stuck on one and keep rolling on it, that's fine. We'll take some breaks here along the way, so be ready for that. But otherwise, have a good time.
We're just going to have some fun.
There you go. We'll come in after this. Okay. Thanks, man.
I'm trying to figure out how to not keep bumping into this mic.
And we are back, Warp and Woof Radio at RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. We come to you every week from 10 until noon, and we are grateful to explore all of the great folks around Indianapolis who are doing good, Titus 3, 1, 8, and 14. That is the focus of our show, and we're grateful to do it every single week. Our co-host, Dr. Clyde Posley, had to step out today, had a pastoral concern to take care of. Grateful, of course, for his presence on this program. One of the great things that we're doing in this radio show as well as throughout the community is not simply linking community leaders with each other, but with special focus on linking black and white leaders together. That's really important to all of us, and so we do that every single week. And this week, of course, we have a great opportunity to have a great guest with us, Renita Hills, who is the Voice of the Victims. And Renita, thanks for being with us here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, this is a great opportunity. There's so much in this life that we have to deal with. One of the unfortunate issues, of course, is domestic violence. And so we'll be exploring that today. We talk about that. We're going to be talking about that from a Christian point of view, specifically issues concerning justice throughout scriptures. This is a hot topic always, and it's unfortunate that I have to say that word always. But we certainly have somebody on the show here today who has not only been through it, but is now helping others. And you'll be hearing her story soon enough down the road here as we continue our program. So, Renita, thanks for joining us here today. Tell us a little bit about yourself and give people a little snapshot of where you're coming from.
Well, as you said, I am the founder and CEO of Voice of the Victim. We work with victims and survivors of domestic abuse and abusive behaviors. We help them to transition from being, number one, a statistic. Because the first thing when abuse starts, you automatically become part of a statistic, a part of a select group. I don't like to say unique, because it's not unique, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. But then you transition to being a victim, to a survivor, and ultimately a thriver, in spite of the abuse you endured. We work with women and men. We don't want to ever leave the men out, because unfortunately men are being abused now, and they're coming out more about it. When you think about it, you look at the next time you go to a family reunion or sitting around the table, count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 men. 3 of those 5 men are being abused.
My word.
3 out of 5 men are being abused. And when you look around the table, count women. 1, 2, 3, 4. 3 of those 4 women are being abused.
Now, just for the sake of our audience, so that everybody gets a big picture of this, when you utilize the word abuse,
yes,
let's define that term so that everybody understands that coming right out of the gate.
Abuse is so much bigger than fist to face. It's physical, mental, emotional, psychological, financial, sexual, and unfortunately it's also spiritual. At the end of the day, I like to think of it as by saying, anytime somebody strips you of the wonderful creature God created you to be, if they make you feel less than or not enough of, if they make you feel like you are not the fearfully and wonderfully made creature that God placed in this earth and on this earth, then you have the right and the responsibility to walk away.
Your powerful statement here is one that a lot of folks need to hear about, and quite frankly, I think one of the things that we need to just say right up front is that you are a motivational speaker in this regard. You have had a lot of opportunities to do this in front of various groups. Tell us a little bit about the speaking opportunities, just so we get a sense of that. And, by the way, for those who are interested in contacting you to speak, let's make sure we say that up front. We'll say it a couple other times during the show.
Well, like you said, I am open to speaking to any age group. I've spoken in front of groups in elementary, all the way up to senior citizens. There is no gap. Abuse, unfortunately, happens to any and everyone. It does not care what color of your skin, doesn't care what you have in your bank account, it doesn't care if you live in Carmel, it doesn't care if you live downtown, it doesn't care if you're in California or in Harlem in New York City. Abuse has no respect of person. Therefore, I will go to any area and speak about abuse. I've even spoken to the General Assembly in Virginia about abuse. I had the wonderful, wonderful, unique opportunity to sit in a conference with the President of the United States.
Oh.
President Obama was in office. I had the opportunity to sit in a conference with him to speak about domestic abuse and how prevalent it is in these small towns, not just in these small towns, but in the larger towns. We talked about gun violence. And I know you're an advocate for the NRA, but we weren't talking about taking guns away.
No, of course.
We were talking about being legally having the guns.
Of course.
And making sure that people with mental issues don't get a hold to guns.
Oh, exactly.
So my point of view of that was how many people are dying through guns that are not registered. And by people who really shouldn't have ever gotten the opportunity to get a gun in their hands. And I had the opportunity to talk to our president about that.
About that particular issue.
About that particular issue. And again, I've spoken to elementary school kids. My most, I want to say targeted, for lack of a better way of putting it, would be high school and college.
Okay.
Because that's the area where our teenagers are feeling like they know it all, but they don't really get it.
Right.
And then they go from high school and they go away to college and they're on a campus. They're all by themselves. They don't have mom and dad to immediately protect them. And they take unnecessary risks.
Yes.
They'll walk across the campus at night by themselves. Excuse me. My daughter is in school now. She runs track. So when she has to walk across campus, she makes sure one of us is on the phone with her. So that at least If they're coming up to her, they know, wait a minute, she's on the phone. That's a deterrent. She's talking to somebody. And she doesn't get off the phone until she's locked the door in her apartment behind her.
You know, that's a really very practical point, I think, that really needs to be emphasized. And just let me interject here at this point. This isn't something that I thought about until about 5 seconds ago. Because I work down at IUPUI, because I'm actually still a student there at IUPUI, we need to get you to speak at IUPUI.
Absolutely.
Let me see what I can do about that. And just, folks, this is 10 seconds ago. I just came up with this idea, so we need to be considerate of this. Tell us about the most recent speaking engagement you had.
The most recent speaking engagement I had was at DFAS, the Department of Finance. Oh my gosh, I'm going to forget the last 2 letters. Finance and Security, I want to say.
Okay.
And it was for the National Association for Female Executives. Loved it. It was phenomenal. I walked in the room. When I accepted the engagement, I first thought, DFAS. Okay. What are we going to do with DFAS? Okay, God, tell me what to say in this arena, because she really didn't give me any direction, which is great, because that's when God can come in and do what he needs to do, because, nobody's putting boundaries on him. So I go in the room and I look around and I see just what I just talked about. People who were dressed in jeans, and then I saw CEO seats, and I saw people from every walk. I saw people in the military. I, of course, saw females. We saw men, young and old. I saw some people I knew, which was phenomenal. I have people that you know in the audience, because then you can look out and, oh, I know your face, I feel better now. Contrary to popular belief, public speaking is a little bit frightening.
Well,
no matter how comfortable.
Doesn't matter. You get butterflies no matter what.
No matter what. But the phenomenal thing about it, when I went in there, and I initially was just going to talk about what abuse looks like, but God led me down the path to share my story. And I had the opportunity to tell them parts of the story I'd never told anyone before.
Okay.
And there were people there that just completely were engulfed. I mean, and I didn't realize it until I would look at the photos and the video afterwards. And the CEO of one of the companies came up to me and said, "Would you please come and talk to us?" Because part of what I talked about was being in an office, sitting next to somebody who's being abused, and you might not be able to recognize it. Or if you recognize it, you don't know what to do with that information.
Right. Man, this is huge. And this cuts cross grain against all kinds of endeavors throughout society. This is not one thing, it's everything.
Yes.
When we come back, we're going to take a one-song break here, but when we come back, I want to start by telling a little bit about my own story. I think it's important for folks to get a little bit of sense of that. I know my mom's listening today. Hi, Mom. Love you. So glad that you're in our lives. And you would love Renita, and she would love you. It'd be great. Maybe sometime when you come out for Denver, we'll get that together.
Oh,
but,
I love that.
Yeah, you would. She's a great lady. But we'll talk a little bit more about my story later on in the show. We're actually going to hear the specific story from Renita Hills, the things that have gone on in her life. But until then, we're going to be rocking and rolling through some tunes and also hitting some highlights of what Scripture teaches. You're listening to Warp and Woof Radio at RadioNX.TV at the Cool Groove site. We'll be right back.
Mama watching, man?
I don't know that she's friends with Renita, if she can even watch that, can she?
Well, your mama's friend.
I tagged you.
So you tagged me.
Yeah. So if you're on it, I'm going to try and move this to a better spot.
I'm going to shoot her a quick note.
Hey, Mark.
Yeah.
You know your mama friends with everybody you friends with on Facebook.
What's your mom's
Oh,
name?
is that right?
I mean,
Oh,
you
yeah.
probably following him to everybody.
Yeah, that's true.
What's your mom's
So
name?
your baby.
What's mom's name?
Virginia.
She's my
Virginia.
friend. She's my friend.
She is?
She
What?
is.
What?
Okay.
Okay.
Man, look. Your mama got it. This is the way mamas keep asking when they born.
Yes. Yes, we're Facebook
I
friends.
don't have to wonder where my son is. I just know who he is with Facebook.
I'm trying to find a better angle. Yeah, I can't remember what show it was. She asked.
You know one thing, this apple fritter right here got a brother.
You're having a good old time back there.
You know, I'm in a good place right now.
Okay, y'all forgive me. I was trying to do this a little differently than I normally do. It backfired. It failed. Hey, Miss Lori. Hey, Jason, Bart, Stacy, how you doing? Hey, Charlotte McDaniel, how you doing? You guys know the rules of the game, though, right? You got questions, ask. I was really trying not to do the big.
Well, you got that thing all over the place.
I know. They don't
I mean,
mess
it was
around.
fine as far as I was concerned right there, but that's up to you.
What?
Hey. No, don't leave the woman alone.
Did he start? What you saying over there about me? I know he's saying something.
Oh, shoot.
I got experience in that. You been in here on Saturday?
Uh-huh.
I'm about love just done gave up.
You can't be giving up.
Oh, I gave up on them two. Trying to win that war.
Oh, my word. Well, that, this is probably good for me to have that thing so far away so that, but, then you can't see anybody. You can put it back here.
You sure?
Yes, I don't care.
I'm gonna be obedient.
Obedient?
Obedient.
So anybody who's following us here this morning realize that this isn't the normal thing I do, but this is because Renita's here, that she has drugged me screaming and yelling into 2018 Facebook Live.
See? He's gonna love it.
And I'm
telling
grateful.
you.
I'm grateful.
You're gonna love it.
Yeah. Mama's going to be shooting me a note about this, I'm sure.
And see, the tripod is like, I got it on Amazon for like $4. Mm-hmm. So see,
Yeah,
set it
okay.
up and roll.
All right. I'm going to bring in, we'll come back in, I'm going to say a few words about
commercial after this.
Okay. I'm going to say a few words about Proverbs.
Him that backseat driving over there.
Oh, shoot, man. I'll tell you what. Seriously, I mean, 2.5 years, I can't be as happy as I'm just so happy to be involved with HB. I mean,
Yeah,
seriously,
yeah.
he's helped a lot. Okay. All right. Yeah. Always
It's been
grateful.
a phenomenal experience.
Mm-hmm.
I've said this 100 times over. He's been a wealth of information on so many different platforms and arenas.
Go ahead.
And here we are. We're back again, Warp and Woof Radio at RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. Every Wednesday from 10 until noon, and we have fantastic guests every single week. And this week we have Renita Hills in the studio with us to talk about domestic violence and the issues, of course, that are confronted here. I wanted to start this segment for everybody who's watching and or listening by highlighting what Scripture teaches about this, what Proverbs says about protecting people. And one of the lines here comes out of Proverbs 14:31. He who oppresses the poor reproaches his maker, but he who is gracious to the needy honors him. And one of the great statements that comes out of the Second Testament, the New Testament, is that line in James 1:27. James 1:27 emphasizes the fact that we're supposed to care for the widow and the orphan. And what that means is anybody who is disadvantaged, marginalized, maligned, outcast, in some sense, separate from the rest of the community. And quite frankly, if you have not experienced or don't understand domestic violence, then you certainly don't understand the idea that when you are in that setting, you are distanced from everyone. And we're going to be talking about that in this segment. Another couple of statements here. Proverbs 16:8. Better is a little with righteousness than great income with injustice. Let me say that again. Proverbs 16:8. Better is a little with righteousness than great income with injustice. Folks, if you don't know that rich people get involved in this too, you're missing the boat on that. This is not a poor problem. This is not an ethnic problem. This is not a class problem. This is a world problem. It is a human problem, and it doesn't matter how much money you make. One more, Proverbs 24:10-12. Deliver those who are being taken away to death, and those who are staggering to slaughter, hold them back. If you say, see, we did not know this, does he not consider it who weighs the heart? And does he not know it who keeps your soul? And will he not render to man according to his work? That just eliminates every excuse, folks. Every excuse is just eliminated right there. That famous line that I was mentioning last week in the airports I see all the time now, if you see it, say something about it. Same thing here. We need to be saying something about it. Renita, thanks for being here today. Thanks for what you do. We're going to talk a little bit about my story in a minute, but when you hear those words from Proverbs, what's the thinking that's going through your thoughts?
First of all, you stunted me. Because not because of the words, but because it's so close to the skin, close to the bone.
Yeah.
When I was going through, and I'm sure you felt the same way, my scenario, I wished people had applied that scripture to my life.
Okay.
They did use scripture, but not the right way. They used it in an abusive manner. So I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I have to implement that. I have to start adding that to that piece, those scriptures, the scriptural piece to what I do.
Yes.
So that when I do speak to pastors and preachers and teachers, that they know that I'm not just saying this from a secular viewpoint.
Right.
This is biblical.
Yep.
God commands that we do this. Let's take care of.
You said something interesting just a moment ago when you talked about this scripture can be utilized in a negative way. And we know that anybody's words can be twisted.
Right.
Anybody who's a human being knows that happens all the time. But in this particular regard, let's speak to that issue right here since we're in Proverbs. What is the issue that you faced or know can be faced by domestic abuse situations in a spiritual context, in the church, pastoral, etc.?
When I went to my pastor, the main thing he kept saying to me is 2 are better than 1.
That's what he said when you told him that you were being abused.
And I was ready to leave. Then the other one scripture he said was, by the renewing of your mind.
Okay.
So he was trying to tell me, because let me stop a little bit. My abuse, the physical part didn't happen until way in the end.
Right.
But all the other types of abuse were taking place.
It was taking place.
So he said to renew my mind in the way I'm looking at it. Think about it in a different way.
Yeah, well, let me just say, so for everybody watching me or everybody listening to me, you have to know that this is close to both of us, to both Renita and to me. I lived in a home of an abuser, so this is the kind of thing that I grew up with. And it's immediate. The immediate response I have to your words, to your thoughts, is my blood pressure's going up.
Yeah.
And my neck is turning red, and I'm just angry about this, to hear you say things like this. Get this now, folks, from a pastor.
Yes.
Okay, keep going.
Yes, the pastor one told me, the head lead pastor said, Renita, 2 are better than 1. When I told him I wanted to separate, that all that was going on, that I wanted to separate. During the counseling part of it, he said, you are supposed to submit. You are to submit to him, and he is the head. You are to do what he says. That part was used against me. Then I went to the associate pastor thinking, okay, I need somebody to talk to and understand. And he said, by the renewing of your mind, you have to look at it and think about it differently. You're only seeing it from a small tunnel. Open your mind.
Okay, the only ones seeing something from a small tunnel are those two. Let me just say that right up front. If you're going to rip out of context words, in this particular case, a word out of the whole context of Ephesians chapter 5 about marriage, and not talk about the man's responsibility to love, which, by the way, in the original language in Greek emphasizes commitment and covenant loyalty, then I don't want to hear from you, okay?
Yes.
Those of you watching me on screen right now, I don't want to hear from you if you're going to say something like that to a woman. Okay, I'm coming down now.
And the other part about that is, and I'm going to say this, and I know you'll understand, and I hope everybody hears that's listening and watching will understand. When you go to counseling, I strongly believe in the sanctity of marriage. I do. But if you're going to do counseling, do both secular and Christian counseling. If you're going to do Christian counseling, know your Bible for yourself. Know that when he says, woman, obey your husband. It started out with husband, love your wife.
There you go.
He didn't start out with the woman. God started out with a hierarchy. Husband, love your wife as Christ loved the church. So if you're following Christ and you're watching how he loved the church, it's going to teach you how to love your wife. And if you love your wife right, chances are she's going to do what you ask, because you're going to ask her only to do things that God has asked you to ask her to do.
I'm telling you what.
So there
right
is a hierarchy. If you follow it from God and work your way down, it works.
Yeah.
It falls into line.
Yeah. It's supposed to work, but you have to commit to that process.
You have to commit to the process.
And it can't just be a one-way street. So just a moment ago, I mentioned that this was the kind of thing that I lived out in my own life, in my own home, with growing up, my mom and my sister, that kind of thing. And I say that, I don't mean to belittle or to belabor this, because I don't want to make a big deal out of my story. We're going to hear Renita's story later on. But I want to say this to everybody, because I think sometimes this is lost when we talk about this. And when we talk about domestic violence, we're not just talking about the people that are doing it and the people that are receiving it. You're talking about the family unit within which this now is engaged. And we have we are engaging little people. And so you have to ask yourself the question, if you're seeing this in family units, you have to ask yourself the question, what is happening to those children? And so the kinds of things that are being impacted by the person who's receiving the abuse, this is also being received by these same children. And that is going to be an issue that's going to be a lifelong thing.
It's a ripple. You throw you throw a rock in the middle of the pond, it doesn't just sink to the bottom.
Right.
It ripples out all the way out, and it affects everything that's connected to what hit the middle of the pond.
Right.
And somebody once asked, well, Renita, the pond eventually settles down and it doesn't move anymore. You're right, but that stone is still in the bottom of the pond.
And there are more stones coming, let me tell you.
And more stones are coming. And the pond will never, ever be the same again. Once you throw that kind of thing out there, especially when it comes to domestic abuse. I tell people all the time, I have 2 birthdays. My biological birthday is May 24th, but then my domestic abuse birthday is June 21st.
Okay.
Because the person I was on June 20th will never be there again. I will never be that person again. Okay.
And for all those of you listening and watching perhaps on Facebook Live, we're talking to Renita Hills. We're talking about domestic violence. Renita is CEO, president of Voice of the Victim. We wanted to hit a couple of other ideas here that have to do with a Christian vantage point of things. So let me just highlight a couple of these. One of the things that I wanted to make sure to talk about was Jesus' comments about this. Jesus speaks in general terms in a lot of ways, but one of the terms that he speaks in very specifically is about children. Since we're talking about that, I think it's important to hear what he had to say about children and protecting them. He said this: it would be better for a person who is doing injustice to somebody else, doing unrighteousness to somebody else, if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were cast into the sea, then that he should cause one of these little ones to sin. That's from Luke 17, Matthew 18, Mark 9. It's repeated in a number of the Gospels. What's really important about this is a couple of ideas here concerning what you just heard. The word millstone, when we talk about a millstone, we're talking about a stone that's hundreds of pounds. It was used to grind grain in the ancient times, and so this stone was very weighty. So when we're talking about wrapping a millstone around somebody's neck, we're talking about as soon as you drop that in the water, the person that's attached to it goes straight to the bottom. And I can't think of any other more graphic way than Jesus saying something like this, and the seriousness with which he took this, I think, than to hear those kinds of words from Jesus' lips. Thoughts that you might have, Renita, about this as it relates to children. Comments maybe that you've heard from others or your own experience.
Don't think that they don't know. They know.
They know.
They
Okay.
know. Like I said, my abuse happened in 2002. Here it is 2018. And I'm still learning. They're still telling me things that I thought I hid. Thought they didn't know. Thought they didn't hear. Thought they didn't see. Thought they weren't aware of.
Yes.
And they're still telling me how it felt that day of the abuse. And they're telling me how it was so hard to transition from being that, because they at one point they couldn't be kids anymore because they had to take care of mom.
Oh my! Say that again. That's an important idea.
They couldn't be kids anymore. My 17 and 18-year-old had to take care of their mother. They couldn't enjoy their summer.
You know, this is something that's important for everybody to hear too. Just the other day, I was talking with a young person who talked about a situation which was an abusive situation, not that they were undergoing, but they were seeing. And they said specifically to me about this, that they had to grow up fast.
Yep.
Talk about that for a minute. What changes in a young person's person?
I will start from my oldest and work down.
Okay.
My son had just graduated high school and he was on his way to college.
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't go because I was on disability for a year.
Okay.
Who was going to pay the bills in the house?
Oh boy.
So he stayed home and he worked, which made him, in essence, lose some of his scholarship money.
Oh boy.
Because he had to stay home and work and take care of his mom and his 2 sisters.
Okay.
My oldest daughter was up for scholarships, and she's, oh my gosh, phenomenal athlete in track and field. She's a thrower. Everybody across the country was looking for her.
Oh boy.
But she couldn't do as much traveling because who was going to help take care of her little sister?
Yeah.
And not really mom as much as she was worried about her little sister,
Sure.
who was only 5 or 6 years old.
Yeah.
Who was going to do her little sister's hair? I lost activity of my hands, so I couldn't do hair.
Wow.
I couldn't cook. So she stayed home, and she would make her way to go to school, go to practice, come home. There were times she probably wanted to go hang out with her friends or do something away from the house.
Sure.
But she had to make sure mom and her little sister were taken care of. My son and my daughter had to become the parents.
Okay.
And then the baby, who was 5, then turned 6, she became my caregiver.
Oh my word.
She was come up to me, Mommy, blow into the tube and make sure the
Oh, my
bubble goes
word.
up. And
Oh,
did you
my
take your
word.
medicine? And she, a friend of mine, I had some scars that needed some healing. She taught her how to open up the vitamin E package. You take her little finger and rub the vitamin E. She became the caregiver.
Oh my word.
So they turned from 28 and 27 to, 17 and 18 to 27 and 28. And my 5 and 6-year-old turned to a 16, 17-year-old.
Wow.
And just from one act and in one morning, they instantly had to turn into, they grew up.
You know, this is, for everybody listening again and everybody watching this morning, this kind of idea of children having to grow up fast and maturity takes place quickly. This happens, by the way, in any kind of pain-filled situation.
Yes.
So it's domestic abuse we're talking about this morning, very important, powerful topic. But this is something also that matters in terms of any kind of awfulness that might take place in a home situation where the young person has to grow up quickly. We're really concerned about these kinds of things. And let me just say this again before we go to our next break. The church, let's come back, after our break, let's come back and talk about the necessity of the church's role in this regard. And oh, by the way, all those churches out there who ought to be asking Renita Hills to come and speak at their church about these things, this would be a powerful and important idea. And then later in our broadcast, we are going to hear Renita Hills give her own personal testimony of her own abuse situation and what it led to. You've heard a little bit about the children giving care. You don't know what led up to that. We're going to talk about this later. You're listening to Radio Next, Cool Groove Site. This is Warp and Woof Radio. We come to you every Wednesday from 10 until noon. We'll be right back.
I want to be kind of smooth like you.
Oh man,
That
it's
was so
him, man.
smooth.
It's all HB.
He's so smooth.
Oh no, you'd
He
see
just
it.
does that transition so smooth.
See, I know I got.
take credit for you, you know.
Man, you got my back,
I
man.
got your back, but you got your own skills too.
Oh, man.
You know, yeah. I told you when you first did this,
Yeah.
didn't I?
Yep.
I
That was.
lied to you. I told you could do this. I told her the same thing.
I don't know if I've ever.
I told her the same
I don't know if
thing.
I've ever told Renita this, but when I was first on his show on a Saturday morning, he kind of gets me aside afterwards and he says, "Man, you can talk." I'll never.
Yes.
Most people can't deliver content. Most people can respond. respond to a question when they can't, you know, so like, yeah, I was just cracking up knowing my ENFJ personality. I never get nervous. It's like I can't wait to talk.
Yeah.
And part of that, the script says that I run to the mic and other folks are like,
Yeah.
I said, well, I'm him. You know, since I'm trying to play with it, just I'm him.
That's good.
Let's see if we got any questions here.
Yeah.
All through the mountains, through the journeys, man. You know,
Yep.
we still moving forward.
I'm glad to be on it with you, man.
Oh man, shit, I'm glad we got some great folks.
All right, Stacy, I'll check my inbox. Michael Van Eden says hello, Mark.
Greetings.
I figure he's one of yours, I think. All right, guys. Again, if you have any questions, comments, let us know.
I have to remind myself, you know, I'm on camera now, so I have to be circumspect during the break time. If I start doing this every week, I'm going to have to ask myself, okay, now, Echo, you got to keep it straight now during the break.
You got to remember.
Oh dear.
We had the first few times was like, okay.
Yeah, a little bit of that behind the back wave bit. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so when we come back in, let's talk about the necessity of speaking to the issue in the church, generally into the church's culture. We've spoken generally about the cultural impact of this, but I think we need to get into the church a little bit more here.
Okay.
So after this break, then we'll go another 15, and we'll take a 2-song break at the top of the hour, and then we'll come back after that with your story.
You are so orderly.
I'm an academic, so.
I feel like now my show is like this.
Oh no, that's all right. I watch your show every once in a while, and I just sit there and smile. I hear you ladies talking. You talk about, I went down to the store and I bought this bag. You know, I just smile and think, yeah, how'd you get on that topic?
I mean, it was like, did we spider web or rabbit holes?
Oh my
We gotta
word.
come back up to where we were at.
Oh my word, I just love it.
We have fun.
Yeah,
we
that's
have
it.
fun. And still, I think or I hope get the point across.
Oh yeah. Well, you can have fun and get the point across. I have the flip on that is that I tend to be very serious about this stuff because I think it's really serious stuff. But when I'm with you, I really like you and we're friends and all that good stuff, and so it's fun to talk and chat and give out a little bit that way. But the stuff that we talk about, man, it just drills right into my heart. I tell you.
It's again, this is why we do it, is to raise the awareness. We got your back. Oh, it's back.
Yeah, it's after that.
It's to raise the awareness.
Yep.
So people know that it's not
That's right.
cut and dry.
That's right. All right. Let me see.
And I would love to come to IUP. That would make
Let's
my
keep
life.
talking about that.
We are committed to spending time with Christian young people. The Comenius Institute, where Christian wisdom and college life.
And we are back. Warp and Woof Radio at RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. Just want to say something here about what we do at Comenius. We cross 3 bridges at Comenius. One is into the college sector. So today, for instance, after the show and a couple of appointments, I go down to IUPUI, and actually I'm taking a class down there by a brilliant professor, Jane Schultz. Just love the class called Civil War Literature and Culture. Absolutely loving it, expanding my horizons in lots of different ways. But beyond that, I'm also going to be meeting with students. I'll probably see half a dozen students after class today. Actually, we have a videographer coming down and talking with them about some of the stories. Some of the things have been helpful for them, sitting and talking with us during Comenius Institute times. So we cross that bridge into college. The second bridge we cross is into communities. I mentioned this early on in the show. When we talk about the issue of community, we're talking about the community of Indianapolis. Christians who are doing good here, with special emphasis on black and white leaders, bringing them together. The third is the issue of Christianity into culture. And I'll just mention this because it's actually happening down at IUPUI in a couple of weeks, actually, 2 weeks from this past Monday, April 9th at 7:30. If you're at all interested, come down to the Tech Center down there, nice auditorium. We're going to be hearing an orchestral ensemble there on the 9th of April, Monday night at 7:30. Anybody who would like to come is certainly invited. It's an open environment. And I'll actually be reading poetry along with these students who are going to be playing harp, bassoon, and so on. So if you're at all interested in such things, this is Christianity into culture. We're actually saying to people, you know, we care about all of culture, including things like poetry and ensemble orchestral music. All of that matters. And I would just as soon listen to that as I might get text messages from my brother in Alabama who was just texting me this morning, Manny Montgomery, back and forth. And here's a man who was a great singer, a front man for a band for 10 years, who sang really, really hard rock. And so, you know, I can go in lots of different directions. It's all good here. I wanted to make this comment just leading into our concerns for the church now as we relate our concern about domestic abuse. Let me just mention this comment from Proverbs again. We always come from the book of Proverbs. Proverbs 16:12 says, "It's an abomination for kings to commit wickedness, for a throne is established on righteousness." So the idea is that the king should react to sin as God reacts to sin. I'll make that comment again. Proverbs 16:12, "It's an abomination for kings to commit wickedness, for a throne established on righteousness." And here's the point. Everybody's a king. That's a whole discussion point, by the way, out of Genesis chapter 1. But I also want to make this comment about leaders. If you're a leader, you bear responsibility for the people that you're caring for. And if you're a pastor, so much more so is the impact. So, Renita, let's get to that issue of the church leadership as it relates to domestic abuse. Talk just generally about how is it that you are going to, or if you had the opportunity to communicate with church leaders, how would you say something to them about the issue of domestic violence in the church, their responsibility to it?
First, I would make sure that I understand the hesitancy.
Okay.
Because I understand that you don't understand domestic abuse. You're not understanding what I'm asking or what we as a survivor is asking or a person who's a victim is asking of you. Mm-hmm. And you don't know the legal ramifications of helping. You don't know what arenas you can dance in. You don't know where your boundaries end. I respect and I understand that. That's why I want to come in and talk to you.
Okay.
I want to let you know what you can do to help a victim of domestic abuse.
There you go.
Beyond prayer.
Okay.
And I'm not trying to be facetious, but beyond prayer, you can send them to places that will give them the resources they need. You can send them. There are a plethora of domestic violence shelters and resources in the city. Julian Center, Colburn Place, Wings of Excellence, of course, Voice of the Victim. There's the Salvation Army. There are so many places you can send them to. If you don't know anything else, tell them, I don't know how to help you, but dial 211. I'll sit here while you dial it. Mm. Sit there in that room.
What's 211? Tell
211 is a hub of resources. You call 211 and tell them, I need money with my rent. They will send you to places that will help you with your rent. I need money I need help getting my car fixed. Mm. They will send you to places that will help you.
How about
that? It's a hub of a wealth of information. Mm. Now, if you call them and say, I'm in the middle of a domestic situation, the first they're going to ask you, are you safe?
Are you safe, yeah.
Are you on a phone that you can talk freely?
Okay.
Because if you're not, they're not going to make you sit on the phone and talk if you're not safe or not in a place. They'll tell you to dial 911, which is probably equally as important.
Right.
But as a church pastor, be willing to sit down with them and say, dial 211. Here's a pen and paper. Write down everything they give you. I like to say write down and memorize. Okay. Because if your abuser finds that list, they know you're up to something.
Yeah.
So for me, is to give them the opportunity to dial 211 while they're in your office and write that information down. Help them, guide them into learning how to memorize it and reaching out to those people that they're calling. chances are they're going to be calling either after business hours, quote unquote business hours, because the Julian Center does not close. You can call them in the middle of the night, and the Julian Center will have somebody to answer.
Okay.
Have them to call and start making the first steps to getting help that way. We're not asking you to jump between two people fighting. We're not asking you to go to our house and be the white knight rescuing anybody.
Right.
We're asking you to inform yourself, arm yourself with the information that's needed so you can help arm someone else.
This is a huge issue. Let's repeat that again for everybody. Dialing 211 gets you information on lots of different issues.
Yes.
And this is an important, powerful tool that will give access to, hey, there's all these facilities in the area. But of course, your comment is just as important. 911 is more important than that. If you're in a really bad setting and being hurt, then that's the first number.
The first number you dial is 911. And part of what Voice of the Victim does is we train them how to survive in the middle of it.
Okay.
One of the things I tell people, if you're in the middle of an abusive, don't lock yourself in the bathroom.
Okay.
How are you going to get out?
How are you going to get out? Yeah.
Don't lock yourself in don't run to the kitchen where all the knives are.
Oh, right.
You know, and if you know he has a gun in the bedroom, don't run to your bedroom. The best place to run is out the door.
Yeah.
You know, and if your butt, excuse me, y'all, if you're butt naked, people will pay attention to you running down the street screaming help.
They will, for various reasons. I want everybody
for various
to know.
reasons. But the objective is to get attention so you can get the help.
That's right.
That's the whole goal.
Yeah.
But that's what Voice of the Victim does. We teach you safety, give you safety tools in the abuse, and then we give you the tools to succeed after the abuse.
This is important, I think, we're going to come back to the pastoral issue in just a minute again, but I want to say to everybody, if you're a leader, it doesn't matter if you're a business leader, if you own your own company, if you're working in a company, if you're a secretarial assistant, if you're in a bar, if you're someplace where there's lots of people and you see these kinds of things going on, there are lots of different ways for us to engage this issue. And I think it's really important, of course, from a Christian vantage point, we're first of all approaching this from the church's perspective. So the very first thing you said about what pastors could do is that pastors should at least be able to say, look, here's some information, here's where to go to find this out. So once they've done that, well, let's say we have pastors who are saying, yep, I've got that list, it's right here by my phone, I know exactly when Mrs. So-and-so calls, this is where I need to go. What's the next step, would you say, for pastors and church leaders?
Follow up.
Ooh, follow up. Wow.
Follow up. Because although I may have called and say, Pastor Mark, I need help in this arena because this has happened. And because you gave me the information doesn't mean I utilized that information.
There you go.
So you need to call me back and say, hey, after church, can I have 10 minutes of your time? The abuser will not normally be weary of a pastor saying, hey, give me 10 minutes of your time. Because that's what pastors do. He might want you to work as an usher next Sunday. The abuser may not really know why you're calling to say, give me some time after church Sunday. When you see him after church, make sure you stick to that 10 minutes because the abused person is usually on a tight timetable. They're being watched on how much time they spend with anybody else other than them. So if you say, let me see you for 10 minutes after church, when you see them, pull them away quietly, privately. Hey, I'm just checking in. I'm not trying to get in your business. But did you have the opportunity to utilize the information I gave you last week?
This is huge, folks. Following up with information. So this is true, I think, in any given situation. I'm thinking about my mom right now, just in terms of medical issues. I would imagine that my mom is one of the most paramount people in my life that follows up with my medical situations. So, but I can see this as of necessity in all of these arenas, and even especially in one where you're talking about violence.
So, and that does two things. One, it lets them know that you know that they've done what you're supposed to do if they didn't. And then for me as the abused person, wait a minute, you cared enough to call me and ask me. So maybe I need to go ahead and make that phone call. And don't pressure him. Just, because if you pressure them too much, it's like, okay, you're trying to make me do something I don't want to do.
Let me interrupt and ask this question about abuse, because you've been through it, and for those who are just joining us or waiting for Renita's story, Renita will be telling her story at the top of the hour. We want to make sure everybody stays for that. But when you talk about this issue of being able to say something about it, and folks who are going to follow up with you, what is true about the abused person? Is it true that they need baby steps sometimes?
Oh, absolutely. I would even say it's so much as not even full baby steps.
Okay.
Because they're so stripped of who they are. They're so used to thinking or having somebody else to think for them.
Okay.
Either thinking like that person wants them to think or having that person think for them.
Yeah.
So for you to say baby steps, that's even in some days too much.
Wow. Okay.
Some days, because it's like everybody say, "Oh, one day at a time, one day."
So
sometimes it's 1 hour, even 1 minute at a time.
So when we're talking to leaders here, because we're talking this segment about leadership and the importance of leaders, how important is it that pastors don't push, or church leaders don't push people? What happens to people when they get pushed? Tell us about that. How do abused people feel when they're pushed?
It's just somebody else pushing me, because I'm being pushed at home. And I trusted you. And you're pushing me too.
Oh, boy.
And you're pushing me against the brick. You're
Yeah.
pushing, this brick is pushing me this way.
Yeah.
And you're pushing me this way.
Yeah.
I'm getting squished. So to keep from getting squished, I'm going to run. And I'm not going to talk to you anymore.
I'm telling you, folks, those of you listening, those of you watching, you are getting some really practical advice here. The emphasis, of course, is that you have to be wary of the situation that people are in, but also of the individual themselves, the kind of home that they're coming from, perhaps even the abuser. You need to know about who they are and those kinds of things as well. We've talked about giving information. We've talked about follow-up and what the abused person feels when you do follow up, which is huge and paramount. What other kind of practical steps would you suggest beyond those for people that might be in it or might be helping other people in it?
Be honest. Be honest. If you don't know, be honest and say, I don't know.
Okay.
And especially with pastors, I know you get in that position where you feel like you should be able to guide your flock in every scenario. But I have more respect for a pastor that says, I don't know, but let me find somebody who does.
There it is, yeah.
You know, that's not my arena. My pastor now, Pastor Mark, is constantly saying, Sister Renita, you're doing a subject that I won't even talk about. Because I don't want to give anybody bad information. I'm glad you're here, so when things happen, I can tell them to talk to you, because before now we didn't have that.
Yeah.
That to an abused person, that's so important, because they're so filled with lies from everybody. What they feel is everybody, because their whole world is their abuser. So to them, that's everybody. So everybody might not be lying, but the only person they can hear or listen to is the abuser, because he's isolated us from all the other people that will give us positive feedback.
Okay, before we go to break here in a couple of minutes, let me ask this question, and staying with the church issue. How do you deal with this when the abused person, the abuser is in the church with the abused?
Ooh.
I know this is a bigger issue, we're going to get into it next hour, but kind of give us a snapshot of, okay, you're the pastor, okay, you know, you've given out the information, you've followed up, you're honest, but you also know what's going on. And you're not trying to be the white knight getting up in somebody's business, but how do you treat both parties now as the pastor?
Good question, because I didn't get that pleasure. I didn't get that liberty to see how to handle it. I would, from a novice, the survivor point of view, I would probably separate the two.
Okay.
That would be me. Separate the two, and associate pastor take one, you take the other, or even meet with them. You yourself meet with both of them, but separately.
But when they're together, let's say, for instance, they're attending the church service together, and so they are together at any given moment. Is there any kind of statement to be used, or how do pastors walk that line of knowing what to say when both are there? Obviously, the abuse isn't happening at that moment, but how do you deal with it right then?
So let me make sure I'm understanding your question.
Sure.
You're the pastor in the pulpit. You're looking out in your congregation, and you know that this couple is a household of abuse.
Yes.
How do you handle it at that point?
Yes.
I personally would talk to the one who is being abused.
Okay.
Because if you go to the abuser, he's going to assume that the abused is the one that told the pastor.
See, this is why we had you on the show, because your practical insights here, going along with scriptural base, is where we need to come from. We're going to be taking a 2-song break here, coming back at the top of the hour at 11 o'clock with Renita Hill, who is going to be telling you about her own personal story at the top of the hour. You do not want to miss this. This is a powerful story. I've heard it. I've been on Renita's show a couple of times. I've been pleased to be able to contribute in that way to her show. So you don't want to miss this. Make sure that you hang for this. For those who are listening on the podcast, you'll be hearing this on the flip side of our music that will be playing here in just a moment. You're listening to Warp and Woof Radio at RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. We're going to take a 2-song break. We'll be right back. What's that?
This is exciting.
Yeah, it's...
That's some good. Now, you remember what I said, Renita? This is content.
Yes.
People go and pull this up if they want to know some things. This is content.
Yes.
So when they pull it up, it's, damn, I could use that.
And you know, coming into my show, first of all, this is a Christian show. Secondly, we have guests that are Christians who are doing good. And third, they're going to get scripture here. And biblical authority is the baseline for me. So it is with Clyde as well. That's the thing we really agree to. So we come in with biblical authority, and when HB says content, what he's saying about my show is those things. We've got these things going on at Mark's show, and he knows when somebody asks, hey, where can I get this? Go to Mark's show.
Yeah, and even as crazy as my show is, it's always, it's filled with information.
Oh, my word, yeah.
So, you know, I mean, I do a lot of labs, but, you know, if I want to know something specific,
Yep.
I'm going to have people in there answering specific questions.
And very practical, too.
For instance, like the autism piece. The Colts and the Pacers now are inviting autistic groups in and setting up space where they know these kids can't be in the normal atmosphere. But they can still go to the game.
That
huge.
is so cool.
That is huge for a family dealing with, like, damn, I can't take my kids anywhere.
So I can actually say something positive about the Patriots now?
Well, they ain't got nothing to do with the Patriots.
Oh, my.
They probably be the ones who won't do it.
Yeah, they'll pull back at the last minute, right?
No, we don't want any autistic kids in here.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we're talking about you, Josh McDaniels. That's right, we are.
Little weenie.
Oh, my word. Yeah, Kravitz got after him yesterday. On the,
well, you know.
Yeah,
Truth is a light, man, you know. Can't lie about being a fraud.
Stay with Frank Reich, baby. Frank Reich is the man. We got to get Frank in here. Wouldn't it be cool to get the coach of the Colts in here?
I got this little kid, man, and you just don't even understand. I got this kid, Blake Ayers. Little guy from Brownsburg. He's autistic, but he's mild spectrum. But his whole focus is sports. You can ask this kid anything about sports, and he can answer. So I did a live vid. So I'm getting ready to build a show around him. The Lord said, go give him a show. So he's going to get a show.
Oh, that's great.
But the Autistic Society of Indiana will probably pay for it because, I mean, they're really good about supporting programs and initiatives. So
well, if you ever have Frank Reich on here, I want to be there.
Man, hell, if we get the autistic kid,
yeah,
you're going to get a whole bunch of people on there.
I bet he will. Yeah. That's great. That's great. See, this is what I mean about being with HB. I mean,
versus some old 60-year-old battle-scarred dude trying to get an interview.
Are you talking about me? Are you talking about me?
I can't
blame you, Mark.
Oh, shoot.
Damn, that girl sings that song. Now, that's the local chick. Cynthia. Stephanie.
Okay.
Stephanie Turner.
You got any good questions coming up here? Second hour? From your folks here?
No.
No, nothing? Okay.
I'm free.
I'm probably going to get inundated this evening because they're working now.
Oh,
so
and they'll see it later on.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but whatever you guys type in, I'm going to make sure I forward it on
Flip
to
it
you
over,
so we can
Okay.
Even if you take like maybe 5-10 minutes next week to answer those questions
Oh, yeah.
or whatever.
I've got a special guest coming in next week. I got to announce him too, by the way. He works in the IMPD. Let's see, what's his name? Yeah, Chris is coming in. What's Chris's name? Get all these text messages coming in. That's what my mom said.
Seems like it'd be easier to just let go.
I love your mom. She's the best. I love your mom.
All right.
She asked to be my friend. I was like, well, her name is Echo. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. She's good to go. Let's send her a picture.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember how to flip this around so I can. Oh, there we go. Send her a picture in response. There we go.
Mom.
She'll love it. Yeah, you know, I mean, she's reliving it.
Yeah.
You know, and there's that whole thing too. You know,
Yeah.
one of the things she and I have talked about in the past is how do we get past it? You know, and it's been years and years and years. My dad's been gone for over 20. So, but it lives with you.
It's not something it never goes away. It's part of who you are.
Yeah.
And if you try to shut it down, you're shutting down part of who you are.
Yeah.
Now, it's like what I was saying to one of the groups last night. I don't expect anybody to be a public speaker like I am. You just find out who your child, that person you wanted to be when you were 7,
Yeah.
let's tap into that person.
Yeah.
And help build that. And if you decide, I just want to stay home and raise kids, I think what you're going to do is more important than what I'm doing because you're shaping the future.
Yeah.
Something different than what we
Makes a difference.
So,
Yeah.
I don't want people to think that I've arrived.
Yeah.
You know, last week after when you left Middleton's thing,
Yeah.
it got really deep.
Oh,
I mean,
really?
not bad, but a good deep.
Okay.
To where I felt this small. I felt like, oh God, I'm leaving this person in this room. I should not be in this room. And I told him. And then I listened to his CD, and I had a time for me and God to reflect. And I sat in my car and I bawled. I bawled because he said, you're still hearing the voice of somebody telling you you're not good enough.
Yeah.
If you weren't good enough, you wouldn't be in this room. And you're the only one that doesn't know, you're the only one that knows that you don't have a doctorate degree, but you're contributing.
Sure.
You don't let them intimidate you because you're the king's kid, but you're healing. He said, and that's why he made me stay. He said, because I needed to pull that scab off. Let that pus and that infection bleed out so you can heal properly. Somebody's coming. I'm giving you a whole lot now.
That's okay.
He said somebody's coming into your life that's going to be well established and educated. You can't be intimidated by that because that's not who they are. That's what they do. I'm always worried about God putting somebody in my life that's going to be intimidated by what I do. And he showed me, you have to get you right because somebody's coming. And not to say marriage or anything, but somebody's going to come that I don't want you to be intimidated by what they do. Accept them for who they are.
Yeah.
Because that whole day was, I sat in my car for at least 20 minutes bawling.
Okay.
I mean, literally. Because I can hear him saying, I told you you'd better be smart enough. He's dead. And he still has, his voice is still ringing and has a limited amount of power to say, I told you you'd never be smart enough. You're in a room full of doctors. What doctors do? They teach classes. They're in the university level. Here you are. You still work for somebody else. Got this little, and had the nerve to say, little rinky-dink organization, and you think you're doing something. God had to strip me. He had to strip me and remind me of whose I
Yeah.
am.
See, as an academic, I'm going to immediately say to that if you're an academic and you treat somebody like that, you, as far as I'm concerned, you're no academic any longer. The second thing I'll say is that any person who is a professor or teacher worth their salt understands what they don't know first. And they bring those people in that do know. That's why we do this show every week.
Right.
I'm bringing folks in, I don't have a clue. So y'all talk about what you need to talk about. And that, I think, is the benefit of this.
But I will say they didn't say anything. It was me.
Right, I get
It
that.
was
It's
all
not
me.
that simple
Yeah.
on my campus.
Yeah.
This is how one Comenius Institute student sees our work at IUP.
Deprogramming that
I am
voice.
Dr. Mike. Multiple studies show that 75% of Christian young people may leave the church altogether after attending public universities. One of the key ingredients in maintaining Christian faith commitment through college is personal spiritual investment in students. We are committed to spending time with Christian young people. Comenius Institute, where Christian wisdom and knowledge life.
And we are back, Warp and Woof Radio at RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. We are discussing the important and unfortunately present concerns about domestic violence, not just in the home, but in the workplace, everywhere. We have a special guest with us here today, Renita Hills, who's going to be telling us her personal story here at the top of this hour. I know that many of you have been waiting for that, and it's really a special time for us to be able to unpack this or allow Renita to do that. I want to say again at the top of the hour, though, that in fact, Renita and I were just talking about this, how important it would be for you to get her in front of your audience. So let's say you're the pastor of a church. Maybe you want to bring her in for an elders meeting. Maybe you want to you're a CEO of a business and you want to make sure that your people understand, hey, this is going on and this is even going on in the workplace. We need Renita to come in and speak to this. Maybe you have a large group gathering, 300, 400, 1,000 people coming to an event where you're going to be discussing issues that might be tangential to what Renita has to say concerning violence. You need to get her on your program and make sure that you ask her to contribute. So make sure to look for her on Voice of the Victims. You'll find her all over social media. She can give you some more information if she would like. Renita, thank you again for being here. We're grateful for your presence, and I'd like you to take just however long it's going to take you to tell the story that you need to tell about your own experience so that everybody understands what this is about.
Well, let me again thank you so much for having me.
You're more than welcome.
And thank you for letting everybody know that I am available. The support you and HB have given me has been phenomenal. And I just wanted to make sure I say it to everybody. I really appreciate these guys. They are my big brothers and my scaffolding as I move forward in the ministry of helping people in the arena of domestic abuse. My story is a little bit, is interesting. You've heard it before. We've moved from Georgia to Virginia. Before I even start that, let me say this. My abuse, I want you to understand that I've endured every type of abuse imaginable before I even got to the physical. So I'm in Georgia. I got up one morning and went to work. I did my thing. You know, I did my work. I went home, took care of the kids, and I went back to the studio. My ex-husband is a martial arts instructor. So I also ran the business there. So I'd go back to the studio, make sure I get the books together, pay the bills. I go back home, make sure the kids are fed, bathed, and in the bed. And by the time he gets to the house, it's 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. And I'm in the bed and sleep. And I'm giving you a little more story than you've gotten before. And he wakes me up and he says, we need to talk. I was like, okay. And he says, I'm leaving you. And I'm thinking, okay. And he proceeded to tell me all the reasons why, which included I wasn't sexing him enough, I didn't cook enough, I wasn't a good enough wife, a good enough mother. The only thing I did good, and the list went on and on and on for hours. It started about 11 o'clock and it didn't end till like 5:30 the next morning.
Oh, my word.
I mean, hours of him telling me everything I did wrong and how I wasn't good enough, with the exception, the only thing I did right was birth babies. And once they got here, I wasn't good enough for anything else. And he proceeded to strip and take away and accuse me of being, 1, a lesbian, and 2, if I wasn't a lesbian, having an affair. And around 5:30 in the morning, he says, okay, you have anything to say? And I say, well, with all that being said, I only have two things, I think. And you're sitting in the bed like, what do I say?
Yeah,
Number one, I've never even thought about cheating with anybody else since I've been with you. And number two, women don't have nothing I want. And I think the last thing I need to say is, if this is what you want to do, you need to do it. Because right before he said that, he says, I'm going to leave you to, and I found somebody who'll do me the way I want it. So if you want to leave, that's what you think you need to do, you need to do it. And you got that shock.
Yeah, the shock. Yeah.
And so I get up, I go into the living room, I get on the computer, and I call myself, I don't even know what I was typing, but I'm typing, and then next thing you know, it's time for the kids to get up. I get up, I take them to school, and then I go to work, and I get in the office. I got this, ain't gonna mess with me, I got this. And I get the office going, coffee, the whole 9 yards. My supervisor comes in. Good morning, Renita. Good morning. How are you, Dan? Da, 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 da. I'm good. Hey, give me a few minutes. I'm gonna need you to come in the office and take some notes from me, because there's some things I need you to do for me while I'm gone for the weekend. Okay, cool, no problem. You ready? Yeah, I'm ready. I go in. I sit down. He looks at me. Finally, looks at me. He says, "Hey, what's going on with you?" I look up from my notebook and fall apart. I mean, I just bawl and I cry and I cry. And I love this man to this day. He got up, he shut the office door, handed me a box of Kleenex, and he sat back down and he just let me cry. Men, y'all want to jump up and rescue. He didn't. He let me cry. And when I finally got myself together, maybe a box or two of Kleenex later, he says, "So what's going on?" And I told him what was going on, and he said, "Okay, this is what I need you to do. I need you to go back to the block where your house is at. Don't go in, but check on your house, because if the house is in your name," and it was, "there's no telling what he's doing to your house. Once you're sure he's gone, then I need you to go in the house, see what's going on, take pictures of the house, and then go straight to your attorney's office."
Let me just pause here and say, for those of you listening, you are getting some really great practical advice as to how to deal with situations like this. So please continue.
I did what he said. I pulled myself together, and I went to, a phenomenal supervisor. I stopped at my desk to put in the leave form. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, I might not be back today." He said, "You can handle that tomorrow. I need you to take care of you today." That's somebody who cares about the person that's there.
That's right.
The job, he said, "We can figure that out later." So I went and I did exactly what he said. I took pictures of the house. He did do how you cleaning up and leaving stuff. He messed the house up. He didn't destroy the house, but he left a little bit of a mess behind. And I left and I went to my attorney's office and I told him. And he says, "Okay, Renita, this is what you need to do. Do not find him. Do you know where he went?" I said, "No. I know he said he's going to Florida, but I don't know where." He says, "Good. Don't look for him. Don't find him. Let 30 days go by. Because after 30 days, he's officially deserted, and we can go ahead and start the divorce procedures." I thought I was cool. I was like, "Oh, good. We're great." The kids barely knew he was gone. Because he was barely there anyway.
Yeah.
So they barely knew he was gone. 2 weeks later, and please understand that at this point, I'm still stripped. I'm bare. I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't know how to function. I'm really not me yet. I went home and I called my brother and I told him what happened. My brother says, "Okay, this is what I need you to do. I need you to pack your things up and move to Virginia." Initially I wanted to move to New York because all my family's in New York. But he was like, "You can't afford to live in New York. The cost of living is too high. Let me get you to Virginia. We'll get you started there. And then once you get your legs up under you, then if you still want to move to New York, you can." So he started preparing things for me to move to Virginia. But in the midst of those 30 days, my ex-husband came back. Well, my husband at the time came back. I'm not strong yet. Remember, I'm still really weak. I'm still trying to get my legs back. And he convinced me to let him back in the house. I did. But inside of a day, I felt like something's not right. My oldest daughter says, "Mommy, what are you doing? Why are you letting him back?" And the look on her face put me back into perspective. So I told him, no, this is not working for me. I need you to be back out. If we're going to make it back together, I need us to start dating again. Again, I believe in the sanctity of marriage. I never mentioned divorce. He did not want to do that. He woke up the kids, woke up all of them in the middle of the night. Your mom doesn't think I'm good enough, so she's going to mess you guys' life up by having you raised without a man in the house. So I'm leaving now, making this big, huge scene in the middle of the night. And then he finally left. A couple of weeks later, my brother gave me some information on how to move to Virginia, all the stuff to take care of it. He paid for us to go there so we can see some properties. We saw some stuff. I got a job in Virginia. I moved to Virginia. He followed and to visit that November. He came there, visited a church, and he didn't stay with me. He stayed in a hotel. Had a good time with the kids. They loved having him there as a visitor. It was cool because he's gonna leave. He left and said, "Can I come back in Christmas?" Sure, just get you a hotel room. I never stopped him from seeing the children. Mm-hmm. His problem with me had nothing to do with their relationship.
Right.
So if he wanted to visit, that's fine. He can visit the kids. He came and he visited in Christmas, and he asked me if he could move back and move in with me, and I told him no. I'm getting my legs back. I was strong enough to say no. He went back. On his drive back from Virginia to Georgia, he calls and says, "I'm moving to Virginia. Now, this is Christmas." I said, "Okay." He's like, "And I'm going to live with you, right?" I said, "No." I said, "I can't stop you from moving to Virginia. You can move anywhere you want to, but you cannot live with me. You can visit the kids. If you want to date, we can do that, but you cannot live with me." He made a proclamation. He says, "I am moving back to Virginia. I'm going to join your church, and I'm going to make your pastor my best friend.
Oh, boy.
I'm going to get saved, I'm going to get baptized, and I'm going to start the training to be a minister. I'm moving back on January 1st. Now, this was Christmas. He went back to Georgia, shut everything down, closed everything down in less than a week, and he was moving to Virginia. And he was in Virginia in less than a week. Had no place to stay. Went to the church and told the pastors he's living in his car. Renita won't let me move back in with her. I said, "No, I won't." He lived in his car for almost 2 weeks. He would drive around during the day. When he knew I was getting off of work, he'd be in the parking lot waiting for me to get out of my car. That's stalking. Mm-hmm. I meant to give you little pieces of what the abuse looks like.
Yeah.
That's stalking. Finally, he did get a place to stay. He went to the church, got baptized. And I was already in ministerial training, had finished the first half of it before January, and I was starting the second half. They let him join the second half with me and do 2 sessions at once so he can be in the same classroom with me.
Oh, my word. Just pause there and talk just for a second, because we're talking about the practical implications of what your story is about. You just mentioned the issue of stalking, for instance, but why is it important to make sure that if you're a leader in a situation like this and let's say you know the background to this particular perspective, why is it important for you to step in and say, "No, I think we need to do something different here"?
Well, forget the abuse part.
Right.
Let's just talk about what's right.
What's right, okay.
If you know somebody is sitting outside of somebody else's house,
yeah,
every single day when they get off from work, that's just to be right. Dude, that's not good.
Yeah, let's just repeat that line for everybody. Dude, that's not good.
That's not good.
That's not good.
Because if I had myself in place, I would have had the police waiting and watching him. Mm. Why are you stalking her? Why are you here every single day? You do have other places that you can go to. Why are you sitting in front of her house?
We are in the middle of Renita Hill's story about the issue of domestic violence, domestic abuse that she's experienced herself, and is now giving us very practical, specific helps along the way to handle right now in our present circumstance. And I'm really hoping that leaders in the church are especially cognizant of this as we're concerned about a Christian view of these things, so that we get a sense of, hey, you know, maybe I need to develop a pattern, a perspective on this, get some information, maybe have Renita come and speak to our church, to our elders, those kinds of things. We're going to take one song break, and when we come back, we're going to hear the end of Renita's story. You're listening to Warp and Woof Radio, RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. We'll be right back.
I have no idea why I went that far back.
It's okay.
No, I don't. I mean, but there's...
It's okay.
Because everybody, I guess for me, is everybody seeing the stabbing.
Right.
I need them to see what led up
Right.
to it.
This is powerful. It's important. So whatever you're saying right now is going to be helpful to other people. I mean, this is going to be huge. So yes, don't feel bad about going back. It's good.
Because I know.
Yeah, but that's
I don't
okay.
normally go back to Georgia.
Well, obviously, you know, spirit direction here, so that's good.
Yeah.
That's important.
It's amazing.
Yeah. I guess this gives me an opportunity to say, "Hey, Mom."
Hi, Mom.
She's watching.
She's watching.
Yes.
Yep.
She says,
Hey, Mom.
He sends a picture of us, and she says, "I'm watching you guys take that picture."
That is too funny.
I'm loving Mom.
Yeah, you know, Mom, I realize the power of this for you, the difficulty, of course, but the wonder of this is to hear Renita's testimony is the power of being able perhaps to prevent, to help, to come alongside others in the future. You know, for too long the church has been, you know, silent about these kinds
Yes.
of things, and these kinds of programs are helpful. I think if I would only caution in this one thing, and this has nothing to do with you, but I always see the church, I see culture in general. We ride these pendulum swings. I mean, we just hate these people for now, and then we swing it back, and we need these people now. So I think that's always concerned, that we are not on a pendulum, that we say, if we see it, we say it, this is how life ought to be lived. Have opportunities and avenues to go when the possibility is there.
And the bottom line for me, there is no disdain against church. I love my church. I love it. I go there and I'm spiritually fed, so that when I go out in the natural, I can withstand whatever's coming.
Right.
But like any family, there are flaws.
Yeah, that's it.
It's a family.
That's right.
And there are flaws that everything in the black culture, everybody has a Pookie in their family. I mean, they don't want to own it, but everybody has somebody that they want to say, that's Pookie. Let him stay back in that room and play games. Don't mess with Pookie.
I'll be right back.
You're the only one who makes me.
All right, guys, if you have questions, make sure you ask.
I do.
Hey, Miss Lori.
Only you lifts me up so high.
Y'all see HB back there? He going in deep, too. You know what? I got a notice from Facebook about the music.
Absolutely.
I was like,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to say it's mine.
Well, you need to let them know, because I ain't claiming it. I'm just doing my radio thing.
So I guess I gotta say,
You need to let them know this is not. I'm not authorized to play this music.
right, I'm not saying it's my music, I'm just playing it. Because they was trying not to post my stuff last night. I'm like, really?
Well, I hear a lot of people use that disclaimer. This is not my music. I haven't been authorized to play this music, is what I hear a lot of people using.
So I'll just start putting that
You
tag
might want
on
to just
there.
tag that in the beginning.
Yeah, I'll just tag it. I guess they are getting people stealing their stuff, but
Oh man, they should have thought about that when they opened up the internet.
you know,
It's like the texting and driving. Well, y'all should have thought about not letting you text while the car moving. before.
right.
Instead of trying to
Now they do have that app now.
Yeah.
They have that app where your phone won't text or will receive or send while the car is moving. I don't know if I like that, but okay. I don't text when I drive, but it's like giving power to somebody else over my stuff. I pay this bill.
Seeing if Mom had sent me anything else.
God is not absent. on my campus.
I came back just in time.
Now, who's that talking? Is that you?
I believe it is.
Hi, I'm Dr.
Wow.
Multiple studies show that 75% of Christian young people may leave the church altogether after attending public
I have to get your mom to come to our event this in October.
Christian faith commitment through college, personal, spiritual investment in students. We are committed to spending time with Christian young people.
It's amazing you sound different there.
And yes, folks, that was my voice giving that radio commercial for Comenius Institute. We are back, Warp and Woof Radio, RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. We have a wonderful opportunity here today to hear this very important story from Renita Hills. This is a story about domestic violence, domestic abuse in the home. We've been handling this from a decidedly Christian point of view. We've been talking about the basis for understanding these things from a proverbial perspective. The book of Proverbs, what it says about those of us who have responsibility to speak out, to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. And we stopped Renita's story, which, by the way, goes back to a former time that you mentioned. You were surprised at yourself that you started the story so far back. So just give us a brief preamble to the rest of your story by telling us maybe why that early part of the story is important for everybody to hear.
I don't want anybody to ever think that abuse is just fist to face. It is so much bigger. And in all actuality, the first time he ever laid his hands on me was when he tried to steal my life. But I've endured sexual abuse, financial abuse, spiritual abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse. And I want to go back to the sexual abuse real quick. Don't think because you're married you can't say no. It's still your body and you can say no. I was raped and sodomized during my marriage. That is sexual abuse. When you say no and they take it anyway, even with my daughter laying in the bed next to me, you have the right to say no. And for me, that was a sexual abuse. It was emotional abuse because he would get in front of everybody else and do what we call gaslighting. He would say things one way, but then when other people are around, what is she talking about? I never said it. This is what I really said. Or he'd say, I never said I was going to hurt her. I just asked her a question. Because he would wake me up in the middle of the night further in the story when it was time for him to move out of the house finally. He would wake me up in the middle of the night and say, you know what? I wonder what it would feel like if you just stopped breathing. You do realize that I can hit your nose in a certain place and that bone will go up your head and you'll die immediately. And him being a martial artist, when you say that you know you can fulfill what you're asking. But the key word is he was asking me those questions. So when I went to the pastor or the associate pastor and I told him that these were the things he was waking me up to say, he said, Renita, he's not threatening you. He's asking you a question.
Let me just interrupt here again and talk about how my blood pressure is going up again. But beyond that, the emphasis, of course, to be careful of words I choose here, the ridiculous nature of idiocy that goes on in some people's mind to think that somehow that would not be abuse. Okay, I'm done. I'll stop there. Continue.
And then another time was, and I'm not saying this to knock pastors. Please know I'm not doing that.
No,
but
none
I'm
of us are
trying
doing
to
that.
raise awareness here.
There you go.
There was another time when I woke up and I called the associate pastor and I told him a list of things that the conversation that we were having, because he didn't want to move out. The list of conversations that we were having that night. And I called him in tears. I mean, literally bawling, telling him what happened at 5:30 in the morning. And he said, you need to get your emotions in check. Calm down. And I'm like, what? He said, calm down. You are too emotional right now. I will talk. And I worked for the church when this conversation happened. I will talk to you when we get to work. Now, who was to say I was going to make it to work?
Yeah, right.
This was 5:30 in the morning. I didn't have to be to work till 9. Who's to say I was going to make it? And my thought pattern was then, if anybody, even now to this day, anybody calls me in the middle of the night, I'm going to answer the phone. I'm going to figure out why are you calling me in the middle of the night? Because people know I'm an early bed person. And I love my sleep. Sleep and food are my two favorite things. So if they call me to wake me up, I know something is going on. And I'm going to pay attention to what they're saying. I can't remember who it was. It's one of my dearest friend, Paula. She said, Renita, I was thinking about you the other night, and I talked to my mom and said, I believe Renita's one of those persons, if I call her at 2:30 in the morning and say, come get me, she will get up and come get me. I said, yeah, I would. I'd be talking about you the whole time. You're going to buy me some food when I get you. You're going to buy me my Pepsi and my peanuts, and you're going to hear about it, but I will be there for you. So if me as a lay person is willing to go that extra mile for somebody, why is it the leadership of my church? And I have to say this happened in Virginia, not Indiana. Yeah. So don't go backtracking the churches that I've attended. Yeah. It did not happen here.
And here's just this intersection here about this point that you're making, which is really powerful and good. If you're a leader in church and you know that you need to develop this kind of program to help people in situations of domestic violence, even if you set up something, if you set up the person or persons in your church, look, these are the people to call. They don't have to call you as a pastor. That's your job, as Ephesians 4 tells us, is your job is to be the pastor, the shepherd, teacher, and you are to enable others to do the work of the ministry, but at least start the program process. I just want to make sure to say that.
Yes, absolutely, because you may not always get to talk to pastors and associate pastors. I had that liberty because I worked for the church. So I had the access to all those numbers.
There you go.
You talk to your immediate leadership, your immediate leader. If you're in the choir, talk to the choir director, the choir president. If you're the usher board. If you need to go to you talk to somebody in your immediate, and they are supposed to forward that on up the chain. Because you may not always get to Moses. You might have to talk to Joshua.
To Aaron.
Right, and Aaron. But going back to what happened with me, he did everything he said he was going to do. He joined the church, he got baptized, he joined the ministry. He was really, before you knew it, ahead of me in the ministerial training, because they took him aside to tutor to catch him up. But then they ended up he ended up getting further ahead. When it came time for the third session of training, we had to take the classes, they gave him a scholarship. And I had to pay for mine, but of course I don't have the money.
Right.
So he ended up proceeding further ahead than me. And that was fine because it wasn't my season or my time. That's fine. Time went on. We had this Valentine thing coming up, and we were still separated at this time. The Valentine thing came up, and the pastor, again, convinced me to take him back during the Valentine's dinner. First of all, he didn't tell me what type of dinner it was.
Oh.
He told me, yes, I knew it was a Valentine dinner, but I didn't know in the middle of it, they did this reaffirmation of marriage.
Oh, my word.
And he repronounced everybody remarried, and I wouldn't do it. I was the only person sitting down like, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. So it made me look like the bad person in a room full of married couples that are reaffirming their love and whatever. And I got up and went to the restroom until it was over, and he sat in the room telling everybody. I found out later, she just left. She doesn't want to do it. She doesn't want to,
Woe was me.
Yeah. And then when I come back in the room, I'm getting the evil eye and the yuck face. Okay. So he convinces me again to take him back. After this thing, he convinces me to take him back. It doesn't work. I finally go back to the church. I remember, I work at the church. I'm the choir director. I'm the assistant to the minister of music. I teach sign language. I help with the youth choir. The whole thing. I have several positions that I work in the church. We had this huge concert. And after the concert, I get a letter in my hand saying, and I said, okay, I'm going to read this when I get home. No, you need to read this now. So I read it. And it tells me, until you take your husband back and let him live with you, you can't do anything in the church except attend. So I was immediately stripped of everything I was doing in church. The people who were about to graduate from sign language could not graduate because the director of the ministry was stripped of everything they could do in church. So I looked at her and I said, okay, I understand. She says, do you know what that means? I said, yeah, I can't do anything anymore. I understand. I put the letter in my purse, I go home, and he's there, and he says, so how'd things go? Everything went well. Did you get a letter from the pastor? First of all, how did you know I get a letter from the pastor? But okay, yep, I did. So what do you think? What do you mean? Are you going to let me stay? No. But you can't do anything in the church. I said, let me tell you the truth about him. He did me a favor. He said, what do you mean? As a leader, I have people watching what I do. So I was pretty hesitant and very careful about what I'm doing, because people are going to watch me and saying it's okay because Renita did it. But I'm not their leader anymore. So I have nobody watching me or following me. So he did me a favor by freeing me of the responsibility of leadership, because to whom much is given, much is required.
Let's just pause there again to make this comment to everybody. This is a powerful understanding that in life sometimes we need to flip something around to look at it from a different point of view. And that's exactly what you did in this situation. You viewed this, your situation and problem, not as a problem, but you found the problem as a solution.
Yes.
That's a powerful tool, I think, to make sure that people have in this. So please continue.
That didn't go over very well, obviously.
Of course not. Yep.
He was very not impressed with the fact that I'm looking at it as a freedom.
Right.
But then he had to move out next week. So for the next week, well, actually through the entire month, once I gave him the 30-day notice, I did not sleep. He would wake me up all night long and say, if I can't sleep in this house, you can't either. The only real sleep I got was when I went to work early and I set my alarm to wake me up. So I had 30 minutes of sleep in the morning. At lunch, I would get 35 to 45 minutes of sleep at lunch. I'd have a sandwich, or I'd eat that, and then I'd take a nap in the car. And then after work, I'd take a quick nap, or go to, ladies, we do this. We go to the bathroom and take 5-minute naps in the bathroom. But that was my only way of getting any sleep, because at home, I'd get waking up. For 30 days, I'd get waking up.
Just pause here again and to say, when you're in a setting, in a situation like this, you have to create distance.
Yes.
And there's a distance that you create in different ways. It's going to be different ways for everybody.
Yes, absolutely.
I know that it was different for Mom when she was going through this. The distance that she created was literally to leave and not come home until later in the evening. She's a nurse. And oh, by the way, and I should say this to everybody before we continue your story again, and this is a really powerful idea coming from my mom again. Mom, while she was in the house with my dad, she was teaching and training on domestic abuse as a nurse.
Wow.
Now think about this. She told us that she was telling stories to these business leaders in the community where she lived, telling these stories. People could not believe these stories she was telling. They were happening to her. She never told anybody that they were happening to her, but they couldn't believe that this kind of thing was going on. And she was telling the exact stories that were going on in her life at that moment.
Wow.
And she couldn't ever say anything, or didn't want to say anything about it at that particular juncture. I think it's important to say those kinds of things to people so that they understand that we create distance in our situations in different ways.
Yes.
Yeah.
And domestic abuse is very, very personal.
It is.
It's very personal. I like to equate it to cancer. You can have 5 women in a room, and we all have breast cancer on the very same breast, and we all recognize it at the same time, and they can even measure out to be the exact same size. But the doctor will look and treat us individually, because I don't have a history of cancer in my breast cancer in my family. So they're going to treat me differently. And I weigh this much, and I eat this way, and I act this way, and my lifestyle is this way. But then somebody else could have a history of breast cancer all the way down for generations back. Right. So they're going to treat them differently.
There you go.
And then you got somebody who's a vegan that has breast cancer. You got to treat that differently, because they don't get certain foods that I might eat. I'll eat junk food and Lay's potato chips. Oh my God. I'm going to eat me some Lay's potato chips and a Hershey bar in a heartbeat. But that person doesn't eat junk food, so you're going to handle that different. That's the same thing when you're dealing with domestic abuse. You're dealing with the person, the individual, not the abuse. You're dealing with the individual who's being abused.
Yes.
There's a difference.
Okay.
And you can't, it's not a blanket answer.
Okay.
You just can't throw a blanket over it. Okay, it's fixed. No.
Right.
It's very, very unique.
Yeah, so as you're continuing your story, you don't have a choice. I'm going to interrupt you anyway, but I think it's important to just be able to say to people, look, what Renita's saying right now, these things you can do. These are issues that you will see. This is what you can face. So continue your stories. We'll pick up some more of these ideas as we go along.
So he, like I said, a week later, he's had to move out. The night before he was supposed to move out, he comes into my room and says, "Are you going to let me stay?" "No, I'm not." "Well, the only way you're going to get me out of this house tomorrow morning is by calling the police, unless you let me do whatever I want to do tonight." "What do you mean? You let me do whatever I want to do you sexually tonight?" So, again, that was my final, my kids are home on spring break. So what am I going to do? Call the police on them while they're watching? We're not going to have that scene. I'm not going to traumatize them that way. So I took my baby, the youngest, and put it in the bed with my daughter, and I allowed him to do whatever he wanted to do that night. So I was raped, I was sodomized, I was abused, whatever it was. When he was finished, I got up and took a shower, and I cried. Like 40 buckets. The best place to cry is in the shower for me. Because, one, the warmth of the water makes you feel better. But then I don't see the tears. It gives me the illusion that it's the water running down my face and not the tears. But the tears are still cleansing. So I'm in the shower, I'm cleaning up, I'm trying to put myself back together. I do whatever I need to do. There's blood, the whole 9 yards, and I'm cleaning and putting things together. I get back in the bed, I go to sleep. The next morning I get my kids together, we leave. And I look back, and he was like, and he just shrugged his shoulders, and I was like, okay. I left. When we came back a couple of hours later, the kids had no clue of what was going on. Right. At least, to my knowledge, had no clue what was going on. We came back, and everything, all of his things were gone. He also took, those water cooler buckets that you flip over for the water cooler?
Yeah.
We had it about 3/4 of the way full for my youngest daughter. That was gone as well. So, but in my mind, if that's what it takes for you to be gone, that's fine. He left. He did what he needed to do, had his own apartment. He would come by and pick up my daughter again. We have one child together, my youngest. So he would come by and visit all of them, and he would take her to hang out with just father-daughter stuff, which was cool. The others understood. Until one day he came to pick her up, and she literally said, "Mommy, I don't want to stay with Daddy.
Okay.
I don't mind going to get something to eat, but I want to come home." He picked her up and didn't bring her home. He took her, at the time, did not know. He took her across state lines.
Oh, boy.
And I'm calling and calling. He would not answer. Calling and calling. He would not answer. He finally calls me, and he says, "Excuse me, what have you told her about me?" I said, "What are you talking about?" "She won't stop crying. She just keeps saying she wants to go home." I said, "Well, bring her home."
Yeah.
"No, I want to spend time with her. I understand that. But she wants to come home." And then he calls me back later, and he says, "What did you say to her?" "I didn't say anything." "Well, let me talk to her." I got on the phone, and she says, "I want to come home. There are no lights in the hotel, and I'm scared, and I want to come home."
Wow.
Excuse me. He put her in a hotel. There was a storm.
Oh,
and it took all the lights out.
Oh, my word.
So you're away from home.
Yeah.
You want to go home, and you're in a hotel where I can't even watch TV.
So let's even make an intersection here and say that this is called kidnapping.
Yes.
Yes.
But because I didn't have legal custody, it's not kidnapping. It's just a dad taking his child on a trip.
Okay. But
Because-
in everybody else's mind that's listening to this,
Right. In everybody else's mind, it's kidnapping. But legally, it's just dad taking his child for a trip because you didn't say he can do it. Both of you have equal custody.
yeah.
So when I told the police, now I was a little bit smart. When they hung up the phone, because they called from the hotel phone, not his cell phone, because he didn't have the charger because there was no power. So I did *69. I got the hotel lobby. I asked them where they were, what's the name of the hotel, and the address. So I got all that information. I called the police and told them where they were. And they said, "We can't do anything." Okay, fine. Then the prayer warrior in me came out. I started praying, "Okay, God, let her go to sleep. Just let her fall asleep. If she could just fall asleep, she'll be okay." The next morning, he calls. He says, "I'm on my way back. I don't know what you did to her, but I don't appreciate it, blah, 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 blah." Then they get in the traffic jam.
Okay.
So she's in the car, and he keeps saying, "I'm trying to take you back," but they're stuck because there's a pileup on the highway. And she's screaming. So he gets her on the phone with me and said, "I promise you, Daddy's bringing you back. He's not even going to take you back to the house. he's going to bring you straight to my job, I promise. And in my mind, I said, God, please don't let this be a lie.
Yeah, right.
Please don't let this be a lie. Well, when they finally got back home, work was over, so he brought it back to me. And then once I got her back in my possession, the next day I called the social services and whatever the number was to get the custody and child support stuff in order. I didn't want the child support stuff to be in order because I knew that would be another layer of him, a reason to abuse me. I didn't want those legalities in place because I wanted to protect myself and my children. But he could keep taking her. And I didn't want her to do that, go through that trauma. So I went ahead and did that. We did the mediation. We had the whole 9 yards. And this is another part of the story that spiderwebs out, but we're not going to go to the mediation yet. We'll do that another time. It was interesting. Then after that, it was like a year and a half, 18 months later, we come to my son's graduation. He graduated from high school. Phenomenal. We were excited. It was the party of the lifetime. Every night we partied. That boy, it was hard getting that boy across the stage. The rules for Georgia graduation was different from Virginia. So we had to do a lot of work to get him across the stage. It was phenomenal. It was absolutely great. Every night, it was another set of teenagers in my house. I thank God for the top layer so I can go upstairs and get away from my kids.
Yeah.
I stayed in the second floor, and I said, you can have the bottom floor and do whatever you want. Just stay out from upstairs. So on the night of the June 20th, my ex-husband called, and they were still partying, having fun, and I need to talk to you now. And I'm thinking, not now. I have a house full of other people's children, not just mine, other people. And he's like, no, we're going to talk now, or I'm going to bang on that door until you let me in. I said, okay, I will meet you in the parking lot out in front of the apartment. So I went out, and I met with him, and I talked. The first thing he did when I shut the car door, he says, I don't care if somebody's listening. I don't care if you're recording this. You need to take me back tonight or hurry up and find somebody to take care of Cassandra. And I looked at him and said, what do you mean? Just what I said. I need you to do this tonight or hurry up and get somebody to take care of Cassandra because they won't let me get my ministerial license until my house is in order. So that means you have to take me back. And I'm like, but that's not my problem. And my roommate is getting married, and I can't live in the house with them, and they're married.
Right.
I understand that. Get you another place to stay.
Yeah, right.
In my mind, you're making your problems my problems and not my problems. And I'm saying, but still, I'm not saying no. I'm saying not now.
Let me interrupt and suggest this point that you just made about the abuser. Sometimes when we see the person who is doing the abusing, they exactly do what Renita just said. They pawn off their problems onto the abused to make it as if the abused person has done this thing wrong, which is not true, which is not right. But this is part of the protocol that people go through. And something else, I think, of course, to keep in mind as you consider these kinds of things into the future. We have about 5 minutes left. So we have 5 minutes left. In those 5 minutes, I want to make sure, let's fast forward to the important aspect that everybody's been waiting to hear. And not that it was, something good. It's not something good, but we need to hear this part of the story. 5 minutes, tell us.
Okay, we settled that. The next morning, he calls and says, I want to pick up Cassandra. Again, I never stop him from spending time with Cassandra. So when he comes to pick her up, I say, okay, she's still asleep. I hand her to him. I go upstairs and get her clothes. I hand him her clothes thinking, I'm going to watch this phenomenal daddy-daughter moment. He's going to dress her. This is going to be so cute. And I turn to the left to have a seat, and that's the last conscious thought I've had for 3 days.
Oh my.
I woke up in the hospital with 13 stab wounds and 150 staples and stitches holding my body together. There were 4 puncture wounds to my chest. 2 of those wounds punctured both my lungs and collapsed. The right side of my face through the temple was sliced open, right down the middle of my face, and the back of my head from just below the hairline to the crown was sliced open. My right shoulder was split open, which is why I lost activity of my right hand and feeling in my left, because that stab wound to the shoulder messed the feeling up in my left. Then there was one right down the middle of my spine, and the doctor said if I was laying any differently, it would have hit my spine. All these fingers were sliced open, and the left side of my face had to have reconstructive surgery. With that being said, I have to give God some glory here. Every doctor that worked on me that day was not even scheduled to be in the hospital.
Oh, my word.
But they were the best in their field.
Mm.
I had, the one was getting ready to go play golf. He just swung by to pick up the paper check.
Mm-hmm.
The other one was getting ready to leave shift, and he heard the code, and he said, what's going on? He found out, and he decided to stay. Another one was just happened to be in the arena and just said, I'm going to stop by. This plastic surgeon that worked on me, he worked on everything from the inside of my mouth so you see no scars on the outside.
My word.
Now, when I swell to the inside. So when the weather changes, my face swells, and I end up chewing the inside of my jaw.
No.
But there are no scars on the outside.
Right.
I say all that to say, and this is just a tip of some of the abuses that happen. Mm-hmm. But the physical abuse did not happen till the day he tried to steal my life. Mm. So you can endure so many and all the gamuts of abuse and never be hit. Mm-hmm. Hands will never have to switch. None of that takes place. But you're still being abused. You have to look at what is happening and see how it affects you personally. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, this is my famous line. I love it. If they're stripping you of your self-worth, your self-esteem, who you are, if they're making you feel less than the fabulous creature God created you to be, you have the right and the responsibility of walking away. Mm. You are fearfully and wonderfully made by the hands of God. And when he made you, he did not stamp everlasting on your forehead or on your heart. Mm. You are not to be abused. Mm. His fingerprints are all over you.
Just so everybody knows, when Renita says you are not Everlast, by that she means Everlast is a company that creates punching bags. Yeah, yes. So just so you know that.
The objective of God, of you, whether you male or female, is to give and to be loved. Mm-hmm. When God knelt down on that dirt and he created, think about this though, he spoke the word for the birds in the air. He spoke the words for the beasts of the field. He spoke the words for the fish. He spoke the words for the wind, the air, and the sun and the moon and the stars. He spoke those words. But when it came to man, he got his hands dirty. He knelt down and he molded man with his hands. His fingerprints are on man. And then he breathed life. He created with his hand, and then he blew breath to bring life. Then when he made female, he laid man down to rest and committed the most phenomenal surgery and pulled out a rib and created a woman. And then again, he breathed into her. But when it came to humans, he used his hands. That's how much he loves us. He loves us so much that I visually can see God on his knees by the banks of the river, getting a little bit of water, more water, and then mixing it up and shaping us, putting his fingerprints on the essence of our being. And if he could take that much time to create man, that much time to remove a rib and create the woman, how much does he love us?
This is theologian Renita Hills.
Oh,
she is.
You done got me going.
Yeah, I can tell. This has been really good, and your comments here at the end really kind of summarize, from your perspective. And again, we're addressing this from a very Christian point of view. That when we're talking about these very details and the very awfulness of them, we understand that there's sin in the world. We understand that we're finite, fallen, fragile, all of these things. And we wanted to make sure that the listeners at Warp and Woof Radio heard this particular story today, because these kinds of stories are happening everywhere all the time. Pastoral leaders, spiritual leaders need to take responsibility to give the information that is necessary for people like Renita who are in situations and circumstances like this, to give them a place to go and people to talk with. You have been listening to Warp and Woof Radio at Radio Next at the Cool Groove site, and this week has been a phenomenal week. I'm really grateful, Renita. Thank you again for being in here and for sharing your story.
Thank you for having me.
I am going to let you know that this is going to be up on our website soon. Of course, now that Renita has showed me how to do Facebook Live, now I'm all good to go. But I wanted to let everybody know that next week we have somebody coming in here that you will not want to miss. We have an official from the government here of Indianapolis, from Indianapolis Police. Brian Reeder will be with us this coming week, and we'll be talking about issues as it relates to our concerns that we have in the city for justice. And we're going to have somebody from the police, the official police office in here. We're looking forward to that. Hopefully Dr. Clyde will be able to join us next week as well. HB slinging music here as he does so well. Always grateful for him. And just so that you know, his show, Jumbo Love, is on Saturday morning from 8 until 12. Don't miss that. Renita Hill's show, you just had your show last night, right?
Last night, yes.
Yeah, so Tuesday evenings from 4 to 6?
4 to 6.
4 to 6, Renita Hill's show, Voice of the Victim. And don't forget to make sure that you hire Renita Hill to come and speak at your engagement. This is something that she loves to talk about because she loves to help people and loves those who have been abused. Once again, you've been listening to Warp and Woof Radio at RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. You'll hear us again next week on Wednesday from 10 until noon. Until then, we'll see you next week.
Good stuff.
Hey guys, don't go anywhere, Mark, because we might have something going on here.
75% of Christian young people may leave the church altogether.
That was special for you to come and do that. Yeah, you got the end.
Oh, love you too, Lori. Roland, we have to talk. There's much going on.
We are committed to spending
And if you have an opportunity for me to go somewhere, you know I'll come and show up for you guys.
Your meeting with
Yes. Vanessa. Yeah.
at what time?
Noon.
Thank you guys for stopping in and hanging out with us for right now. I am so honored to have this opportunity to talk to Mark. I'm going to be posting this, and we're working on building some new things on the website so you can look at it again and again and again. Thank you so much for joining in. Again, if you have any questions, inbox me, and I'll make sure I get those answers for you. Thank you. Have a great day, and remember, learn to love you.